policies that we put in place to encourage democratization stay in place, even as these brutal Chinese dictators consolidated their hold. All along, the dictatorship has been strengthened by its position and strengthened in its position by exploiting America's wealth and technology, which we have heaped upon them even after Tiananmen Square. We strengthened them at our expense. Our China policy has decimated manufacturing in America and drained trillions of dollars from our economy. Note that. Again, more trillions of dollars drained from our economy. No wonder we're in an economic crisis. The regime in Beijing murders dissidents. It prosecutes and persecutes religious believers, be they Muslims, Christians, or Falun Gong. There is no freedom of speech, no freedom of association, no opposition parties, no free press, no independent judiciary. Yet we treat China better than we do some democratic countries or other countries that have at least made reforms, like Russia, that have made dramatic reforms, although they are imperfect. Over the years, our elite has been encouraged to make deals, especially peace with China. Now, isn't that something we've heard over and over again, just like the mantra of global warming? Oh, we're going to have a democratizing China and world peace if we just continue to allow this one-way free trade policy, which is obviously not working in the interest of our people. Well, if there's one thing that liberals might like even better than stopping man-made global warming, it is world peace. And on top of that, feeling good about a nice slogan, our really rich guys here in America are making a lot of money to boot, and they're friends with all of these policymakers. Well, policymakers promised political liberalization in China would result from more personal contact and more prosperity in China. To get them to do business, well, basically, they promised us that because that's what we needed in order to keep these trade policies in place. Well, the promise that there would be a liberalization in China because they're having more interaction with us, it's what I call the hug a Nazi, make a liberal theory, and it hasn't worked. There has been no liberalization. We've created a Frankenstein monster that now threatens us militarily, and as our subject is here tonight, this gang of thieves now has leverage to drag us down and destroy our prosperity and the prosperity and well-being of our people. We are now vulnerable to a corrupt dictatorship in Beijing, and after Tiananmen Square, we've ended up not just having most favored nation trading status, but under Bill Clinton, he made most favored nation trading status permanent. Bush allowed the Tiananmen Square for the policy to continue. Clinton made it permanent. One of the most disturbing aspects of this unholy relationship has been the transfer of American technology to China. Technology used against our remaining manufacturers and against our defenders, and technology that advances Chinese military power and threatens our safety. Technology has flowed over there. Much of the technology to which I refer was a product of R&D paid for by the American taxpayer. Letting such American innovation be used to bolster and strengthen such a monstrous regime in China is sinful and an incredible betrayal of the American people and a disservice to the freedom-loving people of China. Let us note that I believe the Chinese people are our greatest allies. They are the ones who will rid themselves of this tyranny and save the world from this threat. We must do everything to reach out to the people of China who are our friends by fighting confronting, not fighting in terms of military, but confronting the Chinese dictatorship, just as we should be doing in Iran. But there is a deal between our corporate elite and the Chinese hierarchy. Our corporate elite wins. Our people lose their jobs. Freedom loses. Our government has foisted this upon us. Our government permits the Chinese to keep their currency value artificially low, which even makes China even more able not just to compete, but to overwhelm our manufacturers. They have been keeping their currency artificially low so they can obliterate domestic manufacturing in the United States. And we have permitted the limited access of our products to their market, while at the same time we have opened up our market totally to Chinese-made products. They limit our access to their markets while they have unlimited access to ours. Their currency is kept at a low level to make sure the flow of wealth is coming in their direction by manipulating currencies. We've permitted technology and investment to go there, even though it's a dictatorship. So what we've seen is trillions of dollars have been drained out of our economy. So wages in the United States have been depressed. Our manufacturing infrastructure has been nearly obliterated. We must deal with this situation, or America will continue to slide down even as the power of Beijing ascends. It will continue to affect our security and our prosperity and our freedom, and we will become more docile and more subservient even as the arrogance and maliciousness of the Chinese regime becomes apparent. China trade policy must be on the list if we are to get ourselves out of the downward economic spiral that we are in. Trillions of dollars of wealth being drained from our people. Yet we hear no such proposals about China trade. In fact, there is legislation making its way through Congress that would make the situation worse. Surprise, surprise. It would result in even more American technology now and know-how ending up in Chinese hands and being used against us. There are proposals in Congress to weaken export control laws that control the flow of American technology. I agree that with free nations, our entrepreneurs and enterprisers should be free from the heavy-handed restrictions they now face. This, of course, as long as the final destination of the people we're dealing with is not a transaction that will end up in delivering products to threatening nations like China or Iran. But the American business community insists on one set of rules for all, rather than a two-tiered system, free trade with free and democratic countries, being on one tier with continued controls over the technology transfer to countries which are controlled by dictatorships and belligerent regimes. No, they can't have that two-tiered system. It makes sense, but not to a businessman who thinks of himself as a citizen of the world, not as an American patriot or not as someone who is associated with just Americans. He's a citizen of the world. And of course, yeah, he's a citizen of the world, just like all people around the world. He wants a fast buck. Well, it's our job to protect the interests of the American people, not the interest of an elite that wants to make a fast buck in dealing with dictators. Interestingly enough, one of the issues of contention in this debate deals with the launching of U.S. satellites on Chinese rockets. The last time this was tried, I originally thought it could be done, as long as safeguards were in place to prevent transfer of technology. It turned into a national security nightmare. The safeguards were promised by the Clinton administration, but they were never enforced. And when I realized this, I immediately changed my position on the issue, and in fact conducted a personal investigation that turned out to be to discover a damaging transfer of rocket technology to China. Later, the Cox Commission verified our national security had been severely damaged. Now the same arguments are being made. Now, current Chinese rockets, however, have benefited from the technology they took from us and were given 15 years ago. Well, if we permit them to launch our satellites on their rockets, we will be undercutting our own rocket industry. You can kiss our aerospace industry goodbye. If our major companies like Boeing and GE start outsourcing aircraft and rocket parts to China, kiss our aerospace industry goodbye. Give them even more access to our technologies, and we will not be able to recapture the economic momentum that we need to weather our current crisis. Manufacturing, and yes, our know-how goes to China, we lose. China is and should be treated as America's adversary, both in economics and an adversary to our democratic system as well. But the move to relax our restrictions and controls on the transfer of technology to China is moving forward here in Washington.